afternoon again. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Warm welcome to our virtual attendees for joining us now at the NC Chamber's 80th annual meeting, a celebration of the triumphs of our state's business community. I am Sepi Saidi, CEO of Sepi and chair of the NC Chamber, our advocate and ally for business statewide. And it's my great privilege to be serving as your host today. I'd like to start by recognizing today's sponsors for supporting this year's flagship event, brought to you for the 6th consecutive year by our presenting sponsor, Food Lion. Let's give Food Lion a round of applause. We would also like to extend thanks to Martin Marietta, co-sponsor, and gold sponsors, Duke Energy, Glen Raven, Sepi, and Smith Anderson. There are many other important sponsors for today's event, and I ask that you take note of them in your program and on the slideshow. Despite lingering uncertainty, 2021 was a productive year for the NC Chamber and its members. We secured legislative victories that will boost workforce development in our state by empowering more skilled workers to earn credentials in their area of focus, expanded second chance hiring practices, and enhancing standards related to evidence-based learning methods like the science of reading. We passed bills that will help modernize remote business practices and strengthen our regulatory, legal, and healthcare competitiveness. And together, we helped secure a bipartisan state budget that included big wins for North Carolina's business tax climate and our ability to invest in high quality transportation and broadband infrastructure. We will have opportunities to build on these successes in the upcoming short session as the Chamber team pushes to continue improving our tax, regulatory, legal, healthcare, workforce, and infrastructure competitiveness. Opportunities like repealing our state's harmful franchise tax and implementing a truly modernized transportation funding formula wait just on the horizon. Just as vital for our post-pandemic competitiveness, however, will be our focus on long-term priorities as a community of job creators. The past 2 years have shown us glimpses of the future of work for our businesses and our people. Now it will be up to us to provide the leadership needed to navigate this future in North Carolina. As we enter the human capital era, where employee experience and investments in human potential are quickly becoming the decisive factor in the success of our businesses, future-focused initiatives like the NC Chamber Foundation's Institute for Workforce Competitiveness will become increasingly important. I look forward to networking with each of you and to the opportunity to share more and advance these and other bold ideas over the course of the day. I also look forward to the chance to celebrate a few North Carolinians who have left strong legacies of service to our state, legacies that we can honor through our shared efforts on behalf of a bright future for our companies and our communities. Thank you for your contributions to those efforts and for your continued trust in the MC Chamber as the voice for business in North Carolina. At this time, I'd like to ask Scott Libby, Vice President of Food Lion, to come to the stage for a few remarks. Welcome, Scott.
Good afternoon. Great to be here with you all in person this time. As fun as it is to look at everybody on a 1-inch tile on either Teams or whatever social media account that you're spending your time on, it is wonderful to be here in person. It's hard to believe that we have been dealing with the pandemic for over 2 years. It is incredibly important to Food Lion to make sure that we are supporting the community in times of need. One of the ways that we do this is through Food Lion Feeds. Last year, Food Lion donated 152 million meals to help feeding the hungry in our footprint. One of the things that I am incredibly proud of is over the last few years, starting in 2014, we set what I think at the time was an incredibly aggressive goal of donating 500 million meals by 2020. We achieved that a year early in 2019. When we achieved that, it would have been really easy for us to take a deep breath, pat ourselves on the back, and say 500 million meals is a big deal. What we chose to do was to set a new goal. We set a goal of 1 billion more meals by 2025. We are well on our way. Last year, again, 152 million meals last year. One of the things that I have as an ask of this group is we have a QR code. This QR code, hey Ray, do you have a phone? Excellent. Ray asked for a pack donation earlier, so this is my way. This is my way to get back at him. Ray, does that QR code work from your angle? I know. Excellent. What that QR code will enable you to do, if you're able, is to help us feed the hungry in North and South Carolina. That'll bring you right to a website that makes it really easy to make a donation and help us towards our cause of 1 billion more meals. Food Lion is incredibly proud of being a member of the North Carolina Board, a Chamber of Commerce Board, and a member of the North Carolina Chamber. The businesses that we get to interact with and work with, and the leadership that the Chamber shows across the state is incredibly important and valuable to all of us. This group is an impressive group of business leaders, and I am certain that you will help with our cause. With that, I am going to leave you with a short, I thought it was a Food Lion feed video. Turns out it's a little bit of a different video. It's a Food Lion commercial. But what I can promise you is it will help you save some money on your grocery bill that will offset the donation that you're about to make, Ray. Ray, did you hear that? He's still working on it. That's good work, Ray. Awesome. So with that, I just want to thank you. I'm incredibly proud to be here with you all today, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks a bunch.
And the coupon on top of it. More things? I remember my first stores. We make it easy for all our members to tap into more savings. Digital MVP account is our home, and that's our Food Lion.
Thank you, Scott, and the Food Lion, a great organization for leading in its devotion to our communities statewide. Thank you so much. I hope you join Food Lion and the MC Chamber in supporting Feeding the Carolinas. a network of 10 food banks providing a healthy, adequate, and consistent food supply to every community every day. We encourage you to contribute and to make it simple, as Scott already demonstrated. I don't know if Ray got it or not, but it's a simple way that we have included a direct way for you to do so right here today by scanning the QR code on the screen. And I think it's also in your program on the tables, the QR code should be there. Any amount that you donate matters, and we appreciate it. It's a great cause. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the awards portion of our event, I'd like to acknowledge our many silver sponsors, a testament to how the business community truly comes together to support programs that keep our business climate competitive. Our silver sponsors are Appalachian State University, AT&T, Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina, Curie, First Citizens Bank, First National Bank, Google, John Deere, North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives, Smithfield Foods, Truist, and Wells Fargo. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Without further ado, let's dive into one of the highlights of the NC Chamber's annual meeting, the presentation of prestigious awards for exemplary service to North Carolina. At this time, I will ask Gary Salamito, President and CEO of the NC Chamber, to come and help us with the awards.
Thank you, Seppi. It really is a pleasure to see everyone here. We had only our second board meeting in person in the last 2.5 years this morning, and had great discussion about the priorities of the business community in North Carolina. Had some good meetings yesterday with our foundation to get ready to kick off our Workforce Institute, but it's really all about the people we're going to honor here today. And I have the humble privilege of introducing two of them. So let me jump right in. So the Chamber invests its time and resources each year to recognize exceptional North Carolinians, to both honor and thank them for their contributions to our communities, to our state, and to our country. It's a longstanding tradition to present these awards, the Distinguished Public Service and Distinguished Citizenship Award. This year, our Distinguished Public Service Award recognizes two individuals whose positive change to their community and at the state and local and national level. They have devoted a large portion of their lives to serving others, professionally and privately, not because they expect something in return, not because they think it will improve their reputation, not even because they feel it is their responsibility. They have done it because service is deeply embedded in their identity, and we're forever grateful for the example they set for their contemporaries and for future generations. Please join me in honoring Senator Kay Hagan as one of the recipients of our Distinguished Public Service Award. Senator Hagan served in the United States Senate from 2009 to 2015, and in the North Carolina State Senate, where I met her from 1999 to 2008, rising to serve as chair of the Appropriations Committee. Throughout a distinguished career in public service, she was a tireless advocate for North Carolina families and children, our military community, education, and health. Prior to her time in the North Carolina Senate, Senator Hagan worked in private banking for NCNB. She also served as a fellow at the Harvard Institute of Politics, then as senior policy consultant at the law firm of Aiken Gump in Washington, D.C. She was born in Shelby and raised in Lakeland, Florida. She earned a BA from Florida State University and a JD from Wake Forest University. Throughout her life, she worked to inspire and empower women in the Greensboro community as well as throughout the state of North Carolina and our country. I would like to welcome and congratulate her husband, Chip Hagan, who will serve to receive the award on her behalf. Chip.
Thank you. I'm pleased to have two of our three children up here joining me, my daughter Carrie and my son Tilden, and I appreciate them being able to come and join us here today. I want to thank you for honoring Kay with this award, and I want to also say thanks to all of you who are here to remember Kay's life and honor her legacy. Like many in this room, she was committed to serving her community. First, it was the Greensboro community, where she served on boards and chaired several community organizations. Then she felt that she could serve North Carolina through service in the North Carolina Senate, where she worked hard to promote business and education so that North Carolina would have good jobs and an exceptionally well-educated workforce. Her influence helped create things like the Joint School of Nanoscience and Nanoengineering in Greensboro and renewable energy standards. Lastly, she felt that she could serve our nation through service in the U.S. Senate, where she was known politically as someone who reached across the aisle and was a friend to everyone. Her leadership resulted in a new air traffic control tower at the Piedmont Triad Airport, and that clearly had an impact on the recent announcement of Boone Supersonic, which will be locating there. But it was her effort to build up women in the workforce, and particularly in public service, which really excited her. She asked almost every woman she encountered to consider one day running for office so that they too could make a difference in the world. North Carolina is already the beneficiary from those efforts. So my family and I are honored and humbled that you would recognize her today as the recipient of the Distinguished Service Award. She loved North Carolina, and she finished almost all of her talks with the North Carolina toast. So I hope you'll join me. Here's to the land of the longleaf pine, the summer land where the sun doth shine, where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. Here's to down home, the old North State. Thank you.
Let me begin by going or not going out on a limb and saying that lawyers are rarely mentioned among our nation's most admired professions. See, Seppi, I couldn't make that joke if Ward was still the board chair, so I'm glad we have an engineer in charge now. Add the word government in there so that we're now talking about government lawyers. And I don't need to see the polling data to know that the approval numbers dip even further. And yet here we are today, the entire business community celebrating one of North Carolina's most diligent government lawyers. Now, let me stop to disabuse you of the connotations and innuendos that you may have attempted to associate with that government lawyer title. Our award recipient has worked many late nights, many early mornings, many weekends, and not on trivial things, but on substantial matters that are meaningful to you as individuals and are meaningful to businesses in our state. Her substantive expertise is well documented in your materials and on our website, where you will see phrases like financial services regulation, administrative procedures, where they promulgate things, which sounds like a dental procedure, Karen, and state personnel. These are not easy issues, and yet they represent only a sliver of those that came across her desk or that were the subject of committee members, committee meetings that she kept on track, or that were the focus of litigation that wound its way through our courts and then back to her desk again. So what exactly did our award recipient do? Well, relevant here, in 1993, she made her way to the state legislative building in Raleigh, where her first task was to figure out how a building so symmetrical and so ordered could be so spatially complex on the inside. And if the architecture of that building was complex, that complexity dimmed in comparison to the array of personalities, intellect, and interests that she interacted with daily. But that's the point of a representative system. Those personalities, that intellect, and those interests were possessed by the men and women that our voters had sent to Raleigh to represent them. Our honoree worked with rock stars like the one just recognized, the tireless Senator Hagan, and she worked with others who some may describe as more rock than star. Let me be clear to here, in case there are any legislators listening, that the chamber did not describe anyone that way, but there are some that may describe them that way. It was in my role as a legislative liaison at the State Department of Agriculture, and then later as counsel to the Speaker, where I got to interact with our award recipient on an almost daily basis. She climbed the proverbial ranks of the legislative staffing ladder, and the capstone of her career was serving for several years as the director of the General Assembly's Legislative Analysis Division before her retirement in 2020, which, Scott, we all agree was just last week. To help you understand the significance of having a person like our award recipient working in a nonpartisan role at the General Assembly, I'll call upon the words of a New York Times editorial that appeared in January of 2020. There, the public intellectual Yuval Levine wrote the following: Americans are living through a social crisis. We can see that in everything from vicious partisan polarization to rampant culture war resentments to the isolation, alienation, and despair that have sent suicide rates climbing and driven an epidemic of opioid abuse. Mr. Levin goes on to say part of what he thinks is the reason this has happened is largely because of a failure of our institutions. Let me paraphrase. Many have simply stopped believing in our ability to act collectively because they've stopped believing in the institutions that were, at least initially, designed to guide and correct and collect that collective action. Mr. Levine goes on to discuss this present day shift from trust in our American institutions to our skepticism of them, and of the tendency of our elected class to shun the shaping role that these institutions are to play, and instead to mount them as stages for performance. I bring this up because Karen was a part of the shaping function of the institution of the legislature. Everyone in this room would agree we need that institution and others to work. Our instinct is that if we think these institutions are broken, we can recruit outsiders to go in and help us fix them. But what the editorial writer says is that we really need strong insiders. And that's exactly the role that Karen and her colleagues played down at the General Assembly. Now, you may think this is complete nonsense. If so, that may be because you do not know Karen Cochran Brown. While there were no doubt many fun and entertaining days in her work down at the quote, Great White Building, she also had days during which she had to navigate stressful situations where her honesty and her integrity had the potential to put her at odds with elected officials who wanted the answer to be something other than what she told them it was. Sometimes she had to tell the most powerful politicians in the state, no. Other times she had to tell their staff members, heck no. And I think she took more pride in doing that. Now, if that's offensive to you, that an unelected, accomplished career attorney would tell an elected lawmaker what will and will not work, well, then you don't know Karen Cochran Brown. You know, no person here, Karen included, would describe our state legislature as heaven, but it's what we have. It's the institution that is supposed to mold those who sojourn through it. those whose goal is to make law, those like Gary in the chamber whose goal is to influence the making of that law. And yes, even there, those who are there to stop it or to protest it. All of us, but especially those of us in the business community, we need that institution to work. That, my friends, is what Karen Cochran Brown did. She took a newly minted legislator's rough idea and turned it into legislative poetry. She made chicken salad out of something else that comes from chickens. See, Gary, I told you I was not going to say it, so I didn't say it. She brought, or at least attempted to bring, structure to chaos. Without Karen Cochran Brown, we would still have the sometimes Rube Goldberg-like machine, but nothing would have actually come out of the other end. It was at your desk, Karen, where the novice came to meet the expert, and it was at your elbow where hundreds of members, stakeholders, and fellow staffers learned about character and integrity, or at least as much of it as we could find in the legislative process. If more people knew Karen Cochran Brown and knew more about the fingerprint that she has left on the state, I'm convinced that faith in the institution that houses our state's most powerful branch of government would flourish. Trust me, you'd rather have her fingerprint than her chokehold. Karen, we are, as a business community, profoundly grateful for your contributions. Not only did you make me a better staffer and lawyer, you had that impact on others in this room. You also made the legislature a better body, and you have in turn made our state a better state. Well done, our good and faithful servant. Please come forward to receive your award. It'd be the highlight of my career. Congratulations, girl. Very well done. Let's get a picture.
Wow. I wasn't ready for that. Thank you, Ray. Thank you. Well, I expect that many of you are wondering how an unknown career state employee managed to be on the same list of honorees as a US Senator and the president, former president and CEO of one of the state's largest health insurers. So when you figure that out, would you please let me know? Because it's confounded me since I learned of it. Honestly, when Ray called me and told me that I'd been nominated and selected to receive this immense honor, I was literally stunned into silence. And my family can tell you that doesn't happen very often. I just couldn't imagine why I would have been selected when there are certainly thousands of more deserving North Carolinians to choose from. But then I started to think about what this award was created to recognize. According to the Chamber's website, the Distinguished Public Service Award recognizes an individual who has worked in the public sector to bring positive change to his or her community, and has done so not for riches or reputation, but because service is so deeply ingrained in their identity, so profoundly a part of who they are. I don't know if this accurately describes me, but it certainly reflects what I've aspired to. It represents the noble calling that I responded to as a young attorney. And most of all, it describes many of the dedicated public servants with whom I've had the pleasure and honor to work over the years. This is especially true of the staff of the North Carolina General Assembly. These people are some of the smartest, hardest working, most conscientious professionals I have ever known. They understand that ultimately they work for the people of the state of North Carolina. And to the extent that the laws are written carefully and clearly and consistently, everyone benefits. I have learned so much from these people, And I hope that I have put these lessons to good use by doing my best work. I am proud to have been among a long line of behind-the-scenes worker bees who helped to make the laws of this state better. Therefore, I would like to accept this wonderful award as a representative of all the central staff professionals who have ever worked at the General Assembly. I am deeply grateful to the North Carolina Chamber for this honor. And I thank you for choosing someone who is not famous or a great leader, but an ordinary person who has dedicated her life to public service. However, I could never have had the career I have without the love and support of my family and friends, some of whom are here. So I also have to thank my amazing husband, who unfortunately couldn't be here. He recently had knee replacement surgery and is at home watching this virtually. He always kept our home and our family running when I was at the legislature late at night. And my children, Ariel and Joseph, who are here, who always say that even when I worked late, I was always there when they needed me or when it mattered most. They will always be my greatest accomplishment. Above and beyond, before all else, I thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because everything I am, everything I have, and everything I have ever done is all a result of his grace and mercy. Thank you very much for this award.
Congratulations once again to both of our recipients, and thank you for your remarks, as well as leaving a legacy for incoming generations to build upon. Our next award, the Distinguished Citizenship Award, is given each year to an individual who, above all else, embodies an approach to citizenship that is distinctly North Carolinian. You don't need to have been born here to have it, but anyone who lived here for any significant amount of time can recognize it immediately. It's an ability to appreciate people while prioritizing community. It's a recognition that ambition and hard work are virtues to live by, and that and that great success is also rooted in humility and generosity. And just in the past years, this year's recipient is the embodiment of all of those. Our deepest gratitude and sincere congratulations to Brad Wilson, the recipient of the 2021 Distinguished Citizenship Award. As president and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield in North Carolina, Wilson led the organization through a period of rapid growth and change, 2010 through 2018. Under his leadership, Blue Cross fully implemented the Affordable Care Act in all 100 North Carolina counties, providing coverage for over 500,000 North Carolinians. Prior to joining the company, he was a practicing attorney and served as general counsel to Governor Jim Hunt. His prior civic engagement includes service on a number of boards and commissions, including the North Carolina Board of Transportation, North Carolina Aeronautics Council, and board chair of the North Carolina Railroad Company, in addition to an executive committee member where I met him and treasurer of the North Carolina Chamber. For 16 years, Wilson served on the UNC Board of Governors, which he chaired for 4 years. Currently, he serves as chair of the Governor's Commission on Access to a Sound Basic Education. Additionally, he is a board member of the Research Triangle Park Foundation, the NC Biotech Center, and the foundation boards of the North Carolina Museums of Art and History. Since May 2021, he has been engaged with NC State University as executive in residence, a role he previously held at Wake Forest University. Wilson's many honors and awards include the Order of the Longleaf Pine, North Carolina Business Hall of Fame, Triangle Business Journal CEO of the Year Award, Early Childhood Champion Award, and the John Sanders Student Advocacy Award. Brad and his wife Carol have established significant academic and need-based scholarships at his alma mater, Appalachian State University, and Wake Forest School of Law. A lifelong North Carolinian, Wilson holds a BA from Appalachian State, a JD from Wake Forest University Law School, and an MA from Duke University. As the founder of Wilson Strategic Consulting LLC, he remains active in consulting, executive coaching, and corporate board work, and has been a constant source for me whenever I needed him since taking over this role, and when I was leading the government affairs activity at the Chamber, has been a confident source where I could talk and ask questions and get great guidance. Brad, thank you for your commitment to our great state and all North Carolinians. Congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Wilson.
Well, thank you, Gary, for the kind words. Like all of you, it's great to be out and about. And for me in particular, it's great to be back with the North Carolina Chamber. Gary, I want to thank you and the board and all the membership of the North Carolina Chamber for this honor. No one could have been more surprised than me when Gary called about the good news that I had been given this award. I will admit that shortly after his call, I found the definition of the award, went to the website, and Gary has just shared the entire definition with you. After reading the definition, I almost called him back and said, "Now, are you sure you got the right guy here on the other end of the phone?" But I do appreciate the fact that he stuck with me in that regard. But I did say to myself, after looking at the definition, how does this even happen? How does anyone go about deserving the award as defined by the North Carolina Chamber? There was a particular phrase that's a part of the definition that kept coming back to me as I prepared for today. The award is given, as you've just heard Gary describe, and I now quote, to a private sector leader who, above all else, embodies an approach to citizenship that is distinctly North Carolinian. Now think about that phrase with me for just a minute. What does that mean? Distinctly North Carolinian. And how does one go about doing that? One thing that I recognize and was reminded of and have now concluded yet again, the various opportunities that I've had to lead over the course of my career in a manner that is apparently distinctly North Carolinian, I did so with the help of hundreds, if not thousands of people. So I stand before you today as a composite of all of them who have invested their time, their talent, and their treasure in me. My parents, who provided a loving and nurturing environment and the encouragement to do my best in all things and always in the service of others. My wife, Carol, whose love and steadfast support of me and our family has made all that I have ever had the opportunity to do and all that I may have accomplished possible. And we've had a lot of fun along the way doing it, and we're not done yet. Our children, Ann and Alex, and their wonderful spouses, Mary Elizabeth Wilson and Rob Kratz, who make us proud every day as kind, generous, and accomplished citizens in their own right. And most importantly, as nurturing, loving parents of our 4 grandsons. I want to thank the public school teachers of North Carolina, the faculty, of the higher education institutions that it has been my privilege to attend, athletic coaches, church leaders, all of whom inspired me to learn, have faith, work hard, and never quit. Governor Jim Hunt, who gave a young lawyer in Lenore, North Carolina, a chance to serve the people of North Carolina at the highest level, and who always set an energetic example and commitment to public service. Carol and I are forever indebted to Governor Hunt and Carolyn Hunt for providing opportunities for service and for everlasting friendship. Across this room today, and particularly kind of over here in left field, there are dear friends, former colleagues who have touched our lives, both personally and professionally. From Appalachian, from Wake Forest, from Caldwell County, Granite Falls in particular, state government, the UNC University system, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina, all of you, and those that you represent who are not here. By your presence here today, you are representing them. You have made it possible for us to distinctly lead in a North Carolina way. It is because of our work together, that I accept this award on your behalf. As I conclude, I remind all of us that our distinctly North Carolina work is incomplete. It is a never-ending responsibility. Like all times, there are important issues before us today that we, the business leaders of North Carolina, as North Carolina leaders, have a duty to understand and to address, just like the Chamber has always done. Now, all of us know that our state motto is esse quam videre, to be rather than to seem. As leaders, as North Carolina leaders, we need to be for access to quality health care for over 600,000 of our neighbors through the expansion of Medicaid. We need to be for every child to have an access to a sound basic education through full implementation of the Leandro Plan. We need to be leading like Food Lion to address food insecurity for 1.4 million North Carolinians, over 4,000 of whom are children. Thank you. We need to be working to ensure a safe and healthy environment where everyone is secure in their home, and where they rise each day to breathe clean air, drink safe water, and work, learn, and play in a safe, flourishing community. We need to be, and remember the words in the definition, we need to be private sector leaders who, above all else, embody an approach to citizenship that is distinctly North Carolinian. to the end that our state is indeed a place where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. That is our responsibility. Esse quam videri. Thank you for honoring me and all who have touched my lives with this award. Thank you very much.
Brad, thank you for those comments. Karen Cochran Brown, thank you. And Chip Hagan, thank you so much for all the great comments. It is truly our responsibility to do more to continue on the legacies of these individuals to create a better North Carolina for all North Carolinians. At this time, I'd like to recognize our bronze sponsors. We appreciate their support in making today's program a success. And these sponsors are Concrete Supply Company, Dominion Energy, Electricities, Gregory Pool, M&F Bank, MVP Southgate, North Carolina Railroad Company, PNC Bank, Small Business and Technology Development Center, True Liant, UNC Health, and Vidant Health, and Wake Med. It is undeniable from our discussions with employers, members, educators, and stakeholders that job creators across industries are struggling with labor shortages and skill mismatch, a challenge further deepened by the pandemic. Businesses are shifting their entire workforce strategies to address their immediate and long-term goals of building their talent pipeline. We were tasked by our foundation board to develop solutions, and it's my great pleasure to officially announce the launch of North Carolina Chambers Foundation's Institute for Workforce Competitiveness in response to the urgent needs of job creators statewide. The purpose of the Institute is to elevate effective workforce initiatives that can be adapted to serve more North Carolina businesses, advance the quantity and quality of the state's workforce, and train North Carolina's next generation of workforce development leadership. Joining us on the stage for a critical discussion on how the North Carolina Chamber is empowering employers are Dan Gerlach, and you can walk up to the stage if you like. Dan, that's fine. Dan Gerlach, owner of Dan Gerlach LLC, Vincent Jinsky, Strategic Initiatives Director at Gaston Business Association, Margaret Robertson, Vice President of Workforce Development at Central Carolina Community College, and moderating will be Gary Salamito, President and CEO of the North Carolina Chamber. Time permitting, we will take questions from the audience at the end of this session. We encourage all of you to engage in this critical dialogue. So please raise your hand or type your questions in the Q&A box if attending virtually. Here we go. Gary, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you, Seppi, and thank you all for
what role you all played in this room and our members in this discussion and what we're so excited to launch today. It was architected by everyone in this room over the last year, 18 months, listening to our members, listening to businesses, working with our education partners to get to the point, where we are today. So let's go ahead and jump right in to the discussion. We have some folks here who are critical not only to developing it, but are living every day what the Institute will be doing going forward, which is the work you asked us to do. So with that, Dan Gerlach's going to kick it off for us today. And Dan has been a consultant with us. He has a distinguished career in both government and in the private sector and with Golden Leaf Foundation, and been leaning on him pretty hard over the last 18 months or so to bring this together. But what I'd like you to talk about, Dan, to get us started is where have we been? How did we get here? And what do you think the future looks like for us, given what we're getting ready to launch today? So, and thank you for your help in helping architect this.
Well, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. It's a great honor to join my colleagues on this panel here today and follow such a distinguished leaders in our community, in our state. The challenge facing North Carolina is one that we haven't seen for the past 50 years, quite bluntly about it. We have been growing incredibly fast from the 70s through the end of 2010 at a rate where business had their choice of labor. Really, people were coming here from all over the United States and all over the world to come and to live, to work and play in North Carolina. And since 2010, really that slowed a bit, right? That slowed, the rate of increase has fallen in half. We have an aging population. We have a population that is urbanizing. We have a population that fewer people are giving birth, and we have a slowing reduction in the number of people coming from other countries into our state to work and become citizens of North Carolina. Now, this is all before the pandemic. And the pandemic has exacerbated, laid bare a lot of these challenges to us. And since then, now though, there's a release in the last week from state economists talking about how jobs are back to where they were before the pandemic. The labor force, the people from whom our employers have to choose to come and work for them, to be part of their teams, that is still down 100,000 from where it was 2 years ago. And that's not a recipe for success. So we have a quantity problem, as Seppi said, but we also have a quality problem, right? Our quality problem is everybody in this room has worked to improve the education system of this state in some way, shape, or form to get it where it needs to be, it deserves to be at all kinds of levels. But quite frankly, the skills that we need today to compete in a global economy are not what they once were, that employers are not satisfied with, often with the high school diploma as being satisfactory to be qualified to work in their company. They need some more resilience and more signs of accomplishment. And so that's the challenge that we have to work on, and it has to be business to lead it.
Thank you, Dan. And so with Dan on the dais today, on the stage today, we have two talent pipeline management program graduates. So the foundation is going to do a couple of things through the Institute. Number one is we're going to catch people doing good. We caught two people here that do good every day. And we're going to talk about it, and we're going to share successes, and we're going to share what's working. And so communities that are looking for solutions can adjust and can modify these success stories to fit their community. The second thing that we're going to do, and we're going to hear what a talent pipeline management graduate is and what they do on a daily basis in a moment from Vince and Margaret. But talent pipeline management is a program that we work with the U.S. Chamber on that helps people in their communities from all different backgrounds. They'll share theirs and to look at the information, look at the data in a community on workforce, get together with the businesses and find businesses that have common needs that match up with the data, and then serve as the translator, the connective tissue between the business community and the education community, K-12, community colleges, public and private universities, workforce boards, workforce institutes, and to give businesses that connective tissue to access the important partners they have to deliver not only the jobs of today, but most importantly, also equally importantly, but I would argue most importantly for our future, a very transparent pipeline of talent for the future. These two folks here are gonna, are two examples of 27 people across our state that we hope to have up to 100 in the next 3 to 4 years in community. So Vince, let's start with you. You're a talent pipeline management graduate. Tell us about where you're from, who you work with, and why you did it.
Sure. So I'm going to provide a little bit of context just of where we are today. So I'm the Strategic Initiatives Director for the Gaston Business Association. That's in Gaston County, North Carolina, right next to Charlotte. And I graduated from the TPM Academy last year, thanks to the NC Chambers Foundation. So thank you guys for that. And I'm launching and scaling this talent pipeline management program throughout Gaston County on behalf of our industry partners. Today, that is our manufacturing community. So I'm working with 24 manufacturers today, and I don't want to, I'll say gloss over the seismic demographic shifts that you're talking about, but we're talking about mission critical jobs that aren't really being sourced today. And I'm building and managing. Managing is a different thing than building talent pipelines for their mission critical talent needs. And what that means is we've gotten 24 manufacturers who compete with each other. Typically, they're at each other's throats competing for the same talent, to agree to work together to increase the quality and the quantity of the talent supply. And that's a major deal, the fact that we have 24 people working together on that specific issue. And with our manufacturers today, it's not really an organization, or it's not really an industry that's been well organized in Gaston County. And so the fact that they're willing to work together to, I'll say, submit really, really critical workforce data, the fact that we can analyze our talent supply to figure out where the gaps are between what our demand is for, I'll say, 3,000 jobs that need to be sourced by the next year and what our talent pipeline capacity is. We're really, I'll say, just putting our nose to the grindstone to understand and, I'll say, effectively advocate on their behalf to source talent for them.
So good afternoon. I'm Margaret Robertson. I'm the Vice President for Workforce at Central Carolina Community College. So taking this a little bit from the college perspective, Central Carolina actually serves 3 counties in the state. We serve Chatham, Lee, and Harnett County. So a little bit of growth going on, a few things happening. And we have a lot of very similar kind of scenarios occurring, though we were really trying to say, as we looked at our talent pipeline, and thanks to the North Carolina Chamber, I was able to go through the same program about a year before Vince did. So running just a tiny bit on the front end of that. But really, we've spent the last year pulling manufacturing employers to the table to have very similar conversations, a very similar push on what were their priorities. So it wasn't coming from a college perspective to say, here's what we do and how does this fit your need? It was very much flipping that conversation, asking employers to be in the middle, be the ones driving the conversation to define where their gaps were. And again, it was manufacturers across 3 counties in very similar industries in normal circumstances vying for the very same people. So getting them to come to a room and say, if we collaborate together, if we're going to work together, not just on what are the skills needed that we need, but then how do we go out and find them? How do we bring them in? And who are all the different partners that need to be there? And so it was building those relationships and moving those things forward. They're really critical to a talent pipeline structure. Now, anyone who goes through the TPM program, it is a commitment. And there's a lot of work, and there's a reason there's a lot of work, because there's a lot of pieces to it to make it successful. And so, but the nice thing is that you can then bring it home and make it work for where your community is. I don't know that community colleges necessarily are typically the facilitator, because we do tend to have an agenda, but it is possible for a community college or any other partner to help implement, to help pull it forward. If what you're doing is saying our intent is to support our businesses and grow our workforce. And so we have moved to the place where they are not just defining the skills they need for those entry-level jobs, but now we're reaching out to community-based organizations, to other entities within the community to say, how do we start finding the individuals? To Dan's point, there's a lot of folks who have not returned to the workforce. Or maybe they're in the workforce in roles that don't really meet their skill sets. So how do we reach them? How do we bring other organizations into this conversation? So it's not just the manufacturers talking around how do we solve something, but really bringing all the partners in a community that helps the community move forward. So it is still very much a work in progress, but we are starting to put the pieces in place.
And I will say that it takes a lot of time, I guess, to cultivate employer engagement. One of the things we hear from our education partners a lot is sustaining employer engagement is a really, really difficult thing because oftentimes there's 5 or 6 manufacturers serving on the same 5 or 6 business advisory councils, I'll say being pulled apart in different directions. And what TPM does for our community is it really aggregates that information. It's very, I'll say, responsive to the employer needs. They're in the driver's seat. And when we aggregate those needs and help translate that for our community partners and education partners, it really, I'll say, helps sustain that employer engagement. The work that we're doing isn't, hey, can you submit, answers to a survey that takes 5 minutes? This is us rolling up our sleeves, asking firms to participate in some heavy lifting activities in order to really drill down into super robust workforce needs and data to figure out what our actual problems are.
So that brings us to the next piece that I'd like for you to share with us. Step 1 for the Institute is going to be to find out what's working and find out what's good and be able to push that out to the rest of the state so that people can be agile and that people can amplify and people can adjust what they're doing on success stories. So Vince, we'll start back with you and let's talk about as specifically as you can, well, really from 2 perspectives, from the day you started to where you are today. What did you expect it to be versus what it is? And what are some specific learnings? And then we'll go to Margaret and Dan about what we've learned, particularly over the last 18 months to 2 years.
Sure. So our organization received a grant to, I'll say, fund the work that I'm doing today. It's my job to scale it, but I'll say that grant gave me enough time to do the research to figure out what is an effective solution for our employers today, considering the seismic shifts that are happening in our workforce. And what we came upon with the Talent Pipeline Management Academy, the Talent Pipeline Management approaches, it wasn't this half-baked approach to, hey, let's fix the workforce development ecosystem. It's just incredibly, incredibly robust process to, say, organize the employers first, and then engage the full talent spectrum of education providers. And so organizing the employers first is a really, really big mammoth task. And what the TPM Academy taught me is it really armed us with the tools to, first off, say, aggregate job demand for our manufacturers. So I'll give an example. We have 24 manufacturers we're working with right now in Gaston County. By the end of 2023, they've projected 3,000 job openings for 6 critical jobs, of which are 1,000 new jobs being created. That's a big task in terms of sourcing talent for those 3,000 jobs. Next, we analyze and align all of our job requirements. It's funny, when we were meeting with our Gaston College partners in crime, they said, wow, thank you so much for doing that, because no one's actually ever provided us that kind of clarity in terms of what the employers actually want at scale. And then the fourth part was, I'll say, we're analyzing our talent supply. And while there's a lot of good things that are working, whether that's our apprenticeship programs or our career and technical education programs that are happening through our K-12 systems, when we show the demand-driven data and say, we need to source 3,000 jobs, what are we doing to really advance and move the needle here in Gaston County within our education pipelines? I'll say it's really, really, I'll say, reframe the issue to say, we as employers, we need to get our act together. We need to stop the finger pointing kind of activities. And then we need to really, really engage our education partners as true partners to really improve these pipelines. And so there was kind of the waffling around trying to figure out what's a good solution for our employer community on this workforce development stuff. And once we stumbled upon, I say stumbled upon tongue in cheek, but once we stumbled upon the TPM framework, we just sunk our teeth into it because we know it's super important in a way to engage that full talent of education providers.
Sure, and I think that Vince is making a really good point. You've got to have someone who's got the time and the capacity to really do it. It's not something you just pull off the shelf and have a meeting and think you're going to make those kinds of gains and move that forward. One, just getting manufacturers or any industry, whether it's healthcare or otherwise, convened and getting them to work together to really take on the tasks of what are those critical jobs, prioritize those for us, tell us what really the skills are inside of that, so that we can then look at what that workforce is. That all by itself is huge and takes a lot of effort. And then maintaining those employers, because you've got to be able to show some ROI for them. Where are they getting some advantage out of this? Why do they keep coming back to these meetings? Because they're busy, right? They could do 100 other things. And so why are they coming back to these meetings to move things along? And so it really does take an effort by whoever is doing the management of it to make sure that you're moving things along, that you're showing where progress is happening, that you're connecting back in with all of those partners to move that along. We had a little bit of a slowdown amidst COVID. So a lot of our manufacturers, obviously, they weren't doing anything but keeping business together. And so we're ramping back up again this spring. We've been very fortunate. We have a couple of manufacturers who their presidents are our biggest advocates right now. And that has been huge because they're picking up the phone. They're calling the other manufacturers in the community and saying, you need to come to these meetings. You need to be a participant in what's going on and have your voice in here. And that pulls them in more than me calling them. More, Vince, you're doing great things, but if your other businesses are calling the businesses to join, that's going to bring them in and be part of that conversation. And then again, it really is figuring out what those priority needs are, whether it's bringing in our K-12s, how do we start conversations early for the future workforce, talking to the community college structure in the today workforce, bringing in our higher education partners in our four-year system, because sometimes some of those critical needs are beyond what they're going to get from the community college. So how do we create those bridges? How do we make sure that it's really clear across the board how that pipeline gets structured? So where we're at right now in about a year of doing this is starting to, again, pull those extra partners in. It starts off with the businesses. It starts off with doing all that identification, framing everything out, developing a plan, getting some momentum. And then once you've got some of those things defined, you're bringing in the workforce board, you're bringing in other education institutions, other workforce groups that are all involved with how you build that pipeline, and then giving out jobs. This is your role in this solution. This is how you contribute. And that's kind of the place where we're moving towards, is starting to figure out this is your job in this solution and how you add to the value.
Well, yeah, I think the key thing we're saying is it has to be business led, right? Gary, you know very well that you're asked to serve on 1,000 different task forces and committees and groups looking at different issues that affect the business community. But if it can't be nonprofits or education or government entities, as important they are, it has to be business leading this. And that's why the Institute is different and is so important, is to define what the needs are and allow that creativity and ingenuity of the business sector to say, here's how we think we can get the labor. Despite the challenges we face today, it's not as easy to get the workers we want, but we think we can work with workers who may think they have certain kind of challenges. Maybe it's childcare, maybe it's their health, maybe it's their their history of the criminal justice system or something like that. But if there are people who want to work, it's going to be up to business to help say, this is the ways how we can define this for ourselves to give us the type of team members we need. And so that's the key thing, is it has to be business led. Otherwise, business is reactive and it won't work as well. Simply won't.
Thank you all. As we begin to bring this all together, a couple of things. Number one is, when we look at, we're going to collect information, we're going to convene people, and then we're going to collaborate, and then we're going to tell everybody about it. So the next question that I'll set up with some background is to be thinking about, and we'll start with Margaret, is how to bring it all together. So when we look at where we are, there's going to be a cadence that's established over the next year and repeatedly of bringing the businesses together, Vincent, Margaret, and their colleagues and the individual companies and our leadership together in April to say, okay, where are we? Bringing the stakeholders together, our public sector stakeholders, our education stakeholders together, listening to them, crafting an event one time a year in August, our education and talent supply event, and then bringing both groups together in the fall to say, how do we do? What progress are we making? What's working? And then to begin to build for the next year. I think an important piece here is that this is not a one and done report. So what I'd like to hear from each of you is, if you're sitting here in 3 years, a long time in current times with the rate and pace of innovation we have with a growing state, but if you could look out 3 years and you were successful and things were working, and you had access to some resources, the foundation is going to raise money for Kickstarter grants for TPM graduates to get them going and to keep them going on specific projects. What does that look like? How do you bring all that together in a way? And what's success look like, Margaret, from where you're sitting?
So success looks like a robust talent pipeline for all of our businesses. And so I think one of the things to scale all of this is going to come back down to resources. Every one of these groups requires effort and energy, and you do want to keep them going. It's not a one and done. There is no way I'm going to pull manufacturers from 3 counties together and find a solution and then be able to put it on the shelf and say, we're good. Life is fine. We're going to move on. It is an ongoing scenario, and I think it has to be one where those businesses are saying, what is the next thing? How are we moving on to where we're pulling those next pieces? But then what is the next industry? So for us, manufacturing was the most obvious place to start. We have a huge manufacturing footprint. We have a lot of demand in that space. And we wanted to make sure our existing businesses were very solid as we're seeing all of this new business come in. So there's that bit of responding to who is with us, who are our partners today, in preparation for who is going to be in our workspace in the future. But we have a lot of other industries. We have a really robust healthcare space. We have growing IT space. So how are you building similar structures and having the capacity to do that across multiple things, right? How do you take the fact that this does take effort and does take resources, and saying now we're doing it for manufacturing and healthcare and IT and energy and so on down the line. So that, and then I think what would be really interesting is if we've got a TPM in manufacturing in the center part of the state, and then there's one that's next door to us. How do we leverage that effort? How do we say, are there overlaps here? Are there things that we can do where we're communicating with all of those different education providers to make sure that they're not trying to go 2 different directions because they happen to serve in multiple spaces? How do we do that? And maybe, leverage the North Carolina Chamber to say, where are there those commonalities? Where can we get some consistencies across the state to leverage all of those great resources?
That's a great answer, Margaret. One thing I'd like to add too is this big talent pipeline management program. It's not new on the street this year. It's been deployed throughout other states and other regions across the country. And maybe to steal a couple pages from Kentucky Chamber's book, they've deployed the TPM model all across the state and throughout all of their workforce development board jurisdictions. And I'm hopping on the phone with them at 3 o'clock today to say, hey, what are you guys doing right? How can we deploy a model similar to this across the state? But you're absolutely spot on in saying, what does success look like? Success looks like what the employers tell us success is. And I really like the employer focus that we're driving home, because that's largely been the missing piece of the entire workforce development equation. Proverbially speaking, there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen of workforce development. There's K-12 organizations, there's community colleges, there's 4-year institutions, there's workforce development boards, and it's never not complicated. And the fact that we can organize our employer communities to tie all those pieces together around what their real in-demand needs are today and next year, I think that's absolutely critical. One last thing, and this is something I'm attached to, is this program that we're running. It's not called talent pipeline creation. It's called talent pipeline management. And I'm really attached to that word management because that implies sustainability. It implies we need real-time feedback from all of our partners to assess whether or not we're moving the needle. And it's not a, program that you run for 3 months, pat yourself on the back and say, cool. It's all about, I'll say, cultivating those employer relationships to ensure that they're actually getting an ROI.
Well, I think just the metrics I would use was increased labor force, increased employment in the sectors that you're focusing on, in those areas where we're working, increased replication of those things that are successful, and employment in those sectors in which they're working, period, paragraph. Thanks.
Well, let's give a round of applause. We have some extra questions for our panelists today. Thank you all. So I'm not sure if we have time for questions or not. I'm looking back. I think we should have some time for a couple questions, if there are any. Well, seeing none, let me just quickly thank you all for everything you've done to get us to this point. Thank you to Dan and Vince and Margaret for what they do every day to help us address the #1 issue facing our workforce. And stay tuned, and please reach out to us with your success stories. It's time to catch people being good and doing good for our community. There's a lot going on. So thank you for your time today, and I'll turn it back over to Seppi. Take care, everyone.
Thank you all very much for this great discussion and conversation. We will close our program with a keynote address. You want to hear this. This is really good. The Adaptation Advantage, Thriving in the Great Reset by Heather McGowan, Forbes contributor and future of work strategist. Heather helps leaders prepare their people and organizations for the post-pandemic world of work. She gives lucidity to this topic through her illuminating graphic frameworks and powerful metaphors, all backed by deep research. Ranked by LinkedIn as its #1 global voice for education in 2017, and as one of the top 50 female futurists in the world by Forbes in 2020, she has provided keynote addresses for audiences from startups and government organizations to universities and publicly traded Fortune 500 companies. Heather currently serves on the advisory board for Sparks and Honey, a New York-based culture-focused agency looking to the future of work, of brands. In 2019, she was appointed as faculty member for the Swinburne University Center for the New Workforce in Melbourne, Australia. Heather is the co-editor and author of the book Disrupt Together: How Teams Consistently Innovate, and her latest book, The Adaptation Advantage: Let Go, Learn Fast, and Thrive in the Future of Work. Reached #3 in business management books on Amazon and was recently named one of the best business books of 2021 by Soundview. Heather, it's so fantastic to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello there. You guys still with me? I know closing keynotes, you're always kind of like everyone's ready to go. So thank you for giving me about 45 minutes of your attention. I'm going to walk you through what I see happening in the world, which is probably one of the most profound shifts in human history. Psychiatrists say it takes about 66 days to form a habit. It's been 741 days since the World Health Organization declared it a global pandemic. So we formed some new habits. So whenever folks say to me, when are we going to go back? We're not going to go back. So let's talk about how we're going to go forward. I started noticing recently that there are some really eerie parallels between this moment and about 100 years ago. First and foremost, we've got this kind of plague, flu. Historians are going to call it a plague when they look back at it. We're just beginning to process what it has meant for us. In 2020s, we had electricity as an enabler that really changed things, and it really changed things in the home and for women. Suddenly, work that used to take 12 hours in the home took 2 or 3 hours, and women started looking beyond the home as their sphere. Now we're seeing communication and connectivity change for all of us. The labor disruption in the 20s was physical labor. Now it's cognitive labor. The population change, or the change for some of us in the 2020s, was the 19th Amendment, which gave the women the right to vote. It was part of a change for what it meant to be a woman. And now we're seeing demographic change and changes in what gender itself means. How we engage with our society, it was radio created this common experience. We became a mass consumer society, and now we've been steeped in social media for all the good and bad. And now we have Web 3.0, we're on the cusp of it, in the metaverse. If you haven't heard of those things, it's the idea that we're going to interact in virtual worlds. Our work hours, thanks to Henry Ford, became 8 hours a day in labor unions, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. And now we're looking at hybrid work being a norm, and many people pushing for a 4-day work week. Gini coefficient, if you don't know what it is, it's really simple. It's a measure of, not simple to calculate, simple to explain. It's a measure of income inequality. And we're at the highest levels that we've been at since the 1920s. And what it means is if the Gini coefficient is 1, you have absolute inequality. And so if you had $100 and one person had $100 and 99 people had $0, absolute equality is if you had 100 people and each person had $1. We're never going to live in a world of absolute equality, but the more we live in inequality, it causes actually a drag on our economic growth. Immigration, we're actually now at the highest levels of immigration that we've had since the 1920s, and demographers expect that sometime in the next couple of decades, immigration is going to outpace native birth rates because our fertility rates are declining. And the reaction to that then was the rise of the KKK and the first of the Red Scares, and now it's domestic terror groups. The economy, we had the roaring 20s, because we don't know what happened. Now we have the longest bull market ever, and we don't know what's going to happen. Everyone expects some sort of correction, but we're not sure when or where. And then geopolitically, we're between World War I and World War II then. Now we're in a moment when we don't really know what's going to happen with Ukraine. We've seen a 25-year decline in democracy around the world. So it's really eerily parallel how over 100 years, different changes kind of meant some similar things. So the first and the last, I think, get us questioning our mortality. Like, why am I here? Why does this exist? I think when I get to the later stages of the talk and I talk about the Great Resignation, I think that's some of the stuff that's coming up. All this change at once requires rapid adaptation of who am I? What do I do? Why am I doing this? Where do I live? What is home? And then some of these changes in terms of the people around me don't eat like me, look like me, pray like me, define themselves like I do, cause some fear and resentment in some folks. So in the backdrop of that, I want to look kind of closely at the last couple of years and what it's meant to work. People started asking me about a year ago saying, can you do a talk on remote work? And I was like, yeah, but we've definitely had, 740 plus days now that have questioned whether work is going to continue to be a common, particularly a common physical place. But most of us don't look like that dude, right? So the workplace was designed for a straight white man who had a wife at home to manage all the caregiving responsibilities. And we saw that when women left the workforce en masse. On average, a woman's job is 2.5 jobs before they clock in for work. How we work, we kind of work doing routine and predictable tasks measured in time at 40 hours a week, focused on individual productivity. And I think that's changing, especially as we hand things off to technology. And then what we do, it's really solo and routine tasks to achieve what John Hagel from Deloitte refers to as scalable efficiency. And then why we work. This might be the most profound change coming out of this pandemic. And it's a combination of a plague, which causes an existential crisis, and shifts in our demographics. Because we used to work for a set occupational identity and a status driver. And now it's a question as to why we work. How do we engage folk in work? I just tried to have lunch. We're between 4 hotels and a convention center. The only place open was Jimmy John's. The signs on the doors, we can't get help, we can't be, we are in the middle and it's not over and it's not gonna be a blip. Goldman Sachs is the greatest labor shortage since World War II. So that's how I've organized the talk. We're gonna talk about who works, what we do, how we do it and how we lead, where work takes place, and then why we work. So let's talk about the workforce. We now have 4, in some cases 5, but largely 4 generations of the workforce. And we're seeing a shift in who leads it and who comprises it. So the first is the boomers. Each generation defined by some cultural moments and what work was told to them, what work was presented as a promise. So for the boomers, it was civil rights and the sexual revolution. Work was commit to a company, give it your all, have an adventure, then retire. Gen X, that's me, we're the middle kids. Nobody ever talks about us. 65 million of us, but we get ignored. That's kind of fitting because we grew up in the shadow of Watergate and the energy crisis. We started to see our parents lose their jobs. We were the first latchkey kids. So we thought of a job as just a contract. I'm not going to commit to a company anymore that commits to me. Millennials, they grew up hyper because they were the first population where divorce was the norm and then kids become the central focus. They want to work and work as a means to an end, but it really is a way to express their values and who they are. Gen Z, who are now entering the workforce, this is our first digital norm population, first population of digital natives, who also grew up with terrorism as a norm because they grew up in the shadow of 9/11. They're very entrepreneurial and they want to work with purpose. What's interesting is Gallup did this study recently in the last few months and asked each group, populations from each group, and said, did someone from your home, however you define your home, you live with your parents, you live with roommates, whatever, did somebody, or your relationship, did somebody in your home lose a job or have dramatic cutback in their hours or their pay during the pandemic? So 25% of boomers had somebody economically impacted in their home, 36% of Gen Z, 40% of millennials, and 50% of Gen Z. Now, that's going to define how they view work. That's a really profound impact. We're also seeing a shift in who leads work. We don't talk too much about Gen Z, but we're talking about millennial leaders now. And the largest share of the workforce is millennial and Gen Z. And so it's important you get to know these folks. We are older as a workforce for 2 reasons. 1, it takes more education to enter the workforce now than it used to. And 2, we're living longer. We've added almost a decade over the last 50 years. So that adds, for many folks, almost a decade to the career arc. Notice the median ages in the workforce, 1994 versus 2 years from now. Largest share of the workforce is going to be 55 plus. Racially diverse, you probably know the latest census decline in the white population since we've been tracking. What I think is more notable is not that decline, we knew that was coming for decades, but how fast that came in the youth population, which is the workforce essentially. 18 and under, there's no racial majority. The diverse workforce isn't coming, it's here. Look at our changes in gender. Those took longer. We're at about parity or as close as demographers think we will get in terms of males and females in the workforce. What's more notable, I think, is some of these factors that are underpinning that labor shortage. We've got some stuff in our way that we can fix. So this statistic came up from the RAND Corporation, and it really struck me. So of men age 35, which is prime working age, about 6% of them are unemployed. Of that 6%, 64% have a criminal record. You can smoke a joint in 38 states now. A number of those are probably folks who smoked a joint when they were a kid. We need to look at those records and expunge stuff that isn't really relevant anymore. It has collectively led to a 10% decline in the male labor force participation rate in my lifetime in the last 50 years. Women have been out earning men in degrees since 1982. For every 100 master's degrees earned by men, 140 are earned by women. Collectively, this is 10 million degrees sitting on the sideline. Often I'm sitting on the sidelines because of a lack of caregiving infrastructure. And as I mentioned, Welch's Great Juice did a study before the pandemic, counting up the hours of what parenting is, and largely it's women, but parenting. And parenting is equal to 2.5 jobs before anybody clocks in for work. So these are problems we can fix. I just talked about things in a rather binary way. Now let's talk about what's no longer binary, at least for these two younger generations, which are now comprising the workforce. I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community. When I came out, we were all in the closet, so you couldn't count us. You know, it was sort of 3 to 5%, we thought maybe. Millennials report being 9%. Of that, 17% say that 12% identify as gender nonconforming or transgender. Gen Z, 17% identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community. Of those, 25% expect to change their gender. Now, I'm gonna give you a note on this. These numbers didn't seem right either. What I think it is the growth of the A, ally. Ally was word of the year in Webster's. I think more and more young people are saying, well, I'm part of that community because I have friends. I feel like that's my community. So I think there's a huge rise in allyship more than there's a huge change in sexual identity. The key point here is that of this generation, of these two generations, which is the largest share of the workforce now, 50+% of them think that binary gender markers are no longer relevant in work. So let's talk about what is work. We are going against, through the greatest velocity of change in human history, greater than the electrification change soon. And human adaptation is linear. So as longer further these lines get apart, the more we struggle to adapt, the more we struggle to keep up. And we felt that during the pandemic. One of the things I noted, just as the first month we went into the pandemic, is I thought, this might just be the greatest catalyst to business transformation in history. And I was guessing, and I was right. Most of the tools we used in the pandemic have been around for more than 10 years. Digital transformation is just human transformation. A lot of the tools have been there. It wasn't until we had that forced moment that you could trust your team, see your doctor online, take that class online. And we leapt forward in so many interesting ways. In fact, the pandemic really compressed time, if you look across a number of dimensions, from how we automate tasks to our migration to the cloud, digital transformation, and even vaccine development. Vaccines used to take 10 to 15 years on average. Polio took 50, mumps took 4, most are 10 to 15. Digital transformation, we look at 5-year increments. Migration to the cloud is newer. We were looking at 10-year horizons. And automation of tasks is so far out there, we look at 10 or 15-year horizons. We developed a vaccine in 10 months. How did we do that? It wasn't cutting corners, and we cut some, but it was two main things. It was technology and collaboration. The person who figured out the genomic sequence of the virus itself didn't just share it with a few people. He tweeted it out and said, anybody who can work on it. We had 18 biopharmaceutical companies working worldwide. And then we had the advantage of something called computational immunology, which is basically using a type of artificial intelligence to simulate what the different vaccine candidates would do in the body. So when we got to animal and human trials, we really knew what we were looking at. This may be an indication that we're on the cusp of a scientific boom. I'm in Research Park here. I don't have to tell you guys that. Digital transformation, we leapt forward 5 years in the first 60 days. Digital transformation, human transformation, we started using the tools that had been around us. We're now migrating, according to Accenture, to the cloud at about twice the speed. They say we're about 20% in prior to the pandemic, and they expected the remaining 80% would take a decade. We're on track to do it in the next 5 years. And then the World Economic Forum thinks that the Freyasmer model is not moving fast enough, which was the model that told us how quickly we would hand over routine and predictable tasks to technology. They think we can turn over as much as 50% of our tasks by 2025. I think it's a little hyperbolic, but I think we're going to do it much more quickly. What does that mean? A lot more reskilling, a lot more upskilling, a lot more constant learning. Now, I'm just going to look at two companies side by side. This is an old story, but this is an old story with a new twist. Most people know the old part of the story, which is that Blockbuster and Netflix. Blockbuster went from $6 billion to bankrupt in 6 years, and Netflix, then took off. What people really pay attention to is how Netflix took off. So they had DVDs by mail, and then they quickly switched to streaming. But the reason they were successful is they used an algorithm that would connect people to movies they didn't know they wanted. And then they got into original content, and now the Oscars next Sunday, they are nominated more than anybody else. They're now the powerhouse media company, and they just dipped their toes into two other areas. They're doing a store, which is going to sell, t-shirts, hats, clothing, items from the movies, and they're dipping into gaming, which I suspect they will spin off as a separate line item. So those green and yellow things, orange things don't show up in line items yet because they just launched them. But the consulting firm InnoSight that looks at creative destruction in industries predicts that more and more companies will have this kind of hybrid company. It's a combination of retail and entertainment, or it's a combination of digital and healthcare. And this is just an example of that. We were entering the fourth industrial revolution. First was mechanical, second was the steam engine, third is the internet, fourth is the digital convergence. Now, fourth industrial revolution is not a perfect way of explaining everything that's going on, but it's very helpful if you just want to look at jobs and skills and how they're changing. So in the first industrial revolution, it was learn a skill, jobs were multi-generational, you were just trying to survive. Work was survival. Second industrial revolution, industries were multi-generational. Your family tended to work in the same industry. If you were of European descent, that was your last name, is often your family's occupation. Again, you're working for survival. The third industrial revolution is where we switched and where we're still stuck, I think, which is, pick a good major trade or industry, climb the industry career ladder, focus on your job level, your status, et cetera. But now what we're shifting into, and this is part of the Great Resignation, I think, is learn, adapt, and create new value. A job is part of your life. It's not your entire life. You're going to be traversing a multi-industry career web. And a job is self-expression. It's part of who you are. It's a way to express your values and express yourself, particularly with those two generations in the workforce. I don't think the skills gap's ever going to close. And I actually think that's okay. If we think about it, the skills gap forms when a human demonstrates a skill and the market values the skill in excess of supply. That's actually progress. If companies will take on learning as part of what they do, then skills gaps are progress. It's important to understand skills at multiple levels, and I define them as three. So there's competence. That's perform a task to a benchmark level. People at the panel were talking about that. Tell me what the skills are so I can train the people to do them. Definitely, we're going to need that. The next level is you translate that competence to a new challenge. This is sort of getting an advanced degree, getting further education. This is, additional credentials. That's upskilling. We're going to need both of those continuously. But they're both codifying and transferring existing skills and knowledge. It's knowing what they are and downloading it into somebody else. Where I think we need to spend more time and attention is on capacity. And I define capacity as your ability to meet the moment. It's your intellectual capacity, your curiosity capacity, your mental health capacity. It's not the ability to do everything. And it's the ability to find and frame new challenges. It's the ability to formulate a question as well as the answer. It's the ability to explore to find the next business model, product, service, understand your customer better, formulate new knowledge. That's the domain of the human value era, which I think underpins constant cycles of upskilling and reskilling. We think of jobs as boxes, and I actually think this might go away for a lot of companies. Because basically a job box or description is really defined probably by the last person who occupied that box, which is filled with biases, irrelevant information, and lots of things that leave out the candidate you're probably looking for, because work looks more like this, and you pick up skills all along the way. But then at one point, we draw this artificial line around what should and shouldn't be in the box based upon the last person who occupied it. And I think about it more like an iceberg, and I think we're upside down. What's out of the water is the skills to do. They're often the technical skills. IBM refers to them as perishable skills because they're always replaced by the next set of technical skills. And we focus on that. And a lot of times, by the time you hire that person, your needs have changed. At the waterline, we don't pay attention to, but we're starting to pay attention to. I call them enablers. People call them soft skills, which is a bit gendered. Power skills, uniquely human skills. Excuse me. Those are the skills that make you better at your job. They're why you get promoted. They're why you're a good neighbor, friend, partner. Collaboration, communication, empathy, creativity. We need to focus on more. The more we automate things, the more important those skills become. Below that is an agile learning mindset. Now, Carol Dweck's growth mindset is the idea that you understand your potential is not limited. My agile learning mindset is saying, not only do I understand my potential is not limited, but I understand how entities create value and how I contribute to that value creation. Because gone are the days where I can say, I have no idea what my company does. It's my little job over here. No, because it's changing. And if your company's business model changes, like Netflix said 5 times in 23 years, you have to change at or ahead of it. So you have to understand how you create value. Below that is resilient and adaptive identity. This is where a lot of folks get stuck. Because job loss, involuntary job loss and change takes longer to recover from than the loss of a primary relationship. Why? Because what do we start asking kids at the age of 3? What do you want to be when you grow up? What do we ask university students? What are you going to major in? Pick a major, define your life, take on a mortgage level debt based upon the thin slice of life you were exposed to in high school. How many of you are doing what you did in your undergraduate major if you have one? On average, it's like 24%. But we myopically focus on it. We ought to focus instead on identity. What are you interested in? What kinds of things are you good at? How do you keep folks becoming self-propelled learners? So let's talk about how we work. The challenges ahead of us are no longer about the individual, they're about the collective. They require collective intelligence and collaboration. Managing, ending, likely living with this pandemic is not something that one person can do, one state can do, one country can do, one company can do. Managing climate change, space exploration, which is not just billionaire boys and their toys. Space exploration is going to have profound impacts for us, not only whether or not we go there, but how we live here. Addressing income inequality, which is no longer just a moral issue, it's an economic one. It's about a 1% drag on GDP. And then our future or futures of work are up to all of us. So the challenges ahead of us require collective intelligence and collaboration, but where do we focus? Individual intelligence and performance. Now, a recent survey found that employees want to see companies step up here. 52% want them to do more in climate change, 49% want them to do something to address income inequality, and 46% want them to focus on reskilling. We're going from complicated to complex leadership. So this could be how a product is designed, or really how organizations organize talent. So it used to look at the complicated version. So it used to be like you could make your decisions in certainty because everybody who reported to you had skills and knowledge you have. How many of you, imagine most of you are all managing somebody, do they have skills and knowledge you don't have? If I asked you to raise your hands, you should all raise your hands or you're liars. Because you can't be experts on cybersecurity, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all these things that are coming in at every direction and at a faster and faster clip. So we're living in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The pandemic was the first disruption as of late. It's not going to be the last. The next one may be climate or geopolitical. We don't know what's going to be the next disruption to work. So rather than focusing on individual intelligence, we have to focus much more on collective intelligence. So that brings me to chickens, or hens rather. So Dr. William Muir is an evolutionary biologist at Purdue University. I interviewed him for my book because he had started in the 80s. He was asked to study whether or not we could breed productivity into animals, make super chickens or super hens that would lay more eggs. Hens are easy, you can count the eggs. He told me with every species across over 40 years, the exact same results. So hens are kept in flocks of 9. He would pluck out the hen that laid the most eggs, breed that with other hens that also breed that with another animal, and try to produce a breed of super chicken or super hens. When he went back to check on the super chicken or super hen flock and check on all 9 of them, he expected it to be overflowing with eggs, but no. 3 of them were alive, 6 were dead because they had pecked each other to death. Because when you force animals to produce against each other, it's the sociopath that wins. It's the bully who wins. We do in work. We pit folks against each other when we need collective intelligence and collaboration. So are you creating a super chicken Hunger Games at work? Google wanted to understand this as well. This research is probably a decade old now, but I can include it because it's the best research I've seen out there about it. They looked at 180 teams over 2 years and said, which teams learn the fastest and innovate the most quickly and successfully? Is it the teams with the most time in the industry, most degrees, know each other, diversity? What are the key formulas for success? And what they found was the first quality had to be there, psychological safety. It's a coin turned by Dr. Amy Edmondson of Harvard. And it basically means, can you set the conditions on your team so everyone feels comfortable saying, hey, wait a second, I have a question about where we're going with this. Or, hey, I'm in over my head and I need some resources over here. Or, hey, I think we hit a bump and we need to address this collectively. It has to also be met with dependability, where everyone's accountable. Clarity, what you're trying to do is clear and everyone agrees on it. the mission you're on or the project you're on has potential meaning in the world, you're excited about it, and it connects to your own individual sense of purpose. That's the magic formula, but psychological safety has to be there. So the picture I use here is the most people ever on a surfboard. It's 47 people in Long Beach, California in 2015. They lasted 12 seconds. The reason I use it is this is what work is going to increasingly feel like. You're balancing. My movement affects your movement. Your movement affects my movement. It's no longer about my individual performance. It's a team sport. It's symbiotic. So how are we doing on that front? This is research from Travis Bradbury, who's an emotional intelligence guy, on what levels of emotional intelligence are on average as you go through different job titles. So individual contributors are about here. Supervisors are really focused on their people and very much communicating relationally to them. Managers are here, directors are here, vice presidents are here. Whoops, see what happens? And that doesn't mean that a cutthroat CEO is the best CEO. In fact, there's a high correlation between sociopaths and CEOs. You can look into the research. Doesn't mean they're the good ones. The best ones have the highest level of emotional intelligence, but we tend to reward the people who can cut themselves off emotionally. And that brings me to the mental health chapter of the talk. So this is Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, very famous athletes at the moment of what should have been their greatest glory that they had prepared for their entire lives. Both of them stepped back and said, I can't do it. And some of them got really beat up for it. It's particularly Simone, because she's on a team sport. And people said, well, she let down her team. I 100% disagree. She said, I'm not okay. It's not good for the team if I fall on my head and break my neck. It's not good for me. And it's better for the team members to step up and we work together. I thought it was the best moment of leadership I've seen. She says that bronze medal is worth more to her than any of her other medals. Let's look at what happened during the pandemic. Our rates of anxiety and depression in the US and globally have skyrocketed. And they're even higher if you're at lower levels of income. So it brings up a couple questions for me. First, why do we have this artificial line between mental and physical? If I have a broken foot and I came up here in a boot, you would all be like, well, yeah, it makes total sense. You broke a foot. But if I took a pill this morning to regulate the chemicals in my brain, is that mental or is it physical? Why do we create that line? We create that line because we're saying on some level, keep it to yourself, you can control it, which is not true. And we also think about mental health benefits and all health benefits really, but mental health benefits is something we give up to employees. Like go over there and take care of it. We'll give you when you need it. Don't tell me about it. Is that true if the good mental health of your team is essential for the success of your team? I would argue they're company benefits. And we should start seeing them that way. We should start seeing people that way as well. Let's talk about where we work. We're going through an evolution of place. So we're in the farm for about 10,000 years, factory for 150, office for 75, home for 741. I don't know if we're going to the metaverse yet. If anybody's playing around with it, I'd love to hear from you. I'm trying to figure it out, but so far I'm just breaking furniture and scaring the dog. Gallup says that going forward, they think about 37% of our desks are going to remain empty for the foreseeable future. I think we don't know yet. I think it's going to take several years for us to figure it out. But over 741 days, we've proved we can do a lot more things than we thought we could do. And so far, some folks, work in their lives is shifting in terms of what it means. So it used to be, way back in 2019, if you got a job, and that job was in, say, Boston, and in our reality, if in your relationship you have a family, there's usually a second job that needs to take place for your spouse. And then you think about, well, where am I going to buy my home? And that's, school system considerations, real estate considerations, neighborhood considerations. And then where are those places I belong? And it could be a country club, could be a church, could be a bar. I don't judge. Whatever makes you feel at home, those places that make you feel. And collectively, your community comes out of that. Now, after 741 days, for some folks, trauma, this has shifted. For some folks, they're saying, not anymore. Microsoft just did a big study and they have a whole category they call worth it. Is it worth it? And a lot of folks are asking themselves, is it worth it? Which is why the only place I can get a sandwich is Jimmy John's down here. Because a lot of folks have decided it's not worth it. So if your community is your center, does it need to be Boston? Might not even need to be New England. Might even become a time zone question, depending on the nature of work you do. And then where am I going to buy a home certainly becomes more of a, do I want to live in the country? Do I want to live in the city? What kind of neighborhoods do I want to live in? Where are those places I belong? And then how does my job fit into that? And it doesn't mean we're not going to do great work. I would argue we're probably going to do better work. And I think it might just change our settlement patterns in a way that I hope gets us all talking to each other again. Because we used to put the corporate centers here, and then we made everybody move essentially to the coasts or big cities. And what if people decided they wanted to live here, and then the companies become corporate hubs and centers, and they're broken up and they're across more of our landscape? Let's talk about why we work. So the Great Resignation, some days it's 4.5 million, sometimes it's 4.3 million. I kept changing it. Now I'm just sort of like, it's between the two every month. And understanding that bucket is a few different things. First, it's the folks who retired. Hold on, because I think that bucket is going to grow. There are people who are just getting their bonuses this month, and they're going to be like very soon. Then we've got folks who are saying, you know what, I didn't want to do that crappy job anymore. I'm retraining. I'm rethinking about a new industry. I'm taking courses online. I'm taking a course here. They've used this time during the pandemic to retrain for something else. And 500,000 of us, many minorities finally, are entrepreneurs. So we're seeing a huge rise in entrepreneurship, particularly minority entrepreneurship, which I think is fantastic. And then there are the folks who are saying, I'll hold out until you can pay me more than $10 an hour to get punched in the face. And that's, those folks can't hold out as long, but they're holding out right now. And I think these are the compositions of the people who are leaving the workforce and why. Question now is, what do we do about it? So we've been in the same form, but we haven't been in the same boat. And for folks, there are really 5 levers. I came up with these 5 levers. I've looked at every bit of research and nothing's refuted it so far. So there's competition, and for some people that's number 1, but for a lot of folks it isn't, as long as they're paid above a certain level of survival. Conference Board thinks it's going to be at 4%. Goldman says it's going to be at 5%. I think inflation's about at 7% right now. We're going to have to make pay increases, and they're not going to be temporary. Safety becomes a new factor. Am I physically safe at work? After a pandemic, there are lots of folks who worked in close contact who said, I don't want to be bullied anymore, and I don't want my life to be in jeopardy. But then there's for the folks who are doing knowledge work and being asked to do something they've never been done before, they need that psychological safety. Values and impact. Does this job suck my soul, or does it engage my purpose? Big issue, especially for the millennials and Gen Zs. Lifestyle and balance. We've got a huge burnout epidemic. So the 4-day work week is not just, remote work is not a gift. The people who think that remote work is a gift or a benefit. Your workers worked for you for 741 days and kept the trains running on time. It wasn't a gift. It's now probably a norm. And then career accelerant. When we've got this much change with this many tasks going to technology, it's going to be as important to earn as it is to learn. So can I go somewhere with this job? Am I learning something I can go somewhere within the company or somewhere else? You got younger generations that are restless, and they understand the rate of change. They want to learn. They want to be able to go somewhere. And so I think about it like a pyramid. The compensation and psychological safety are the non-negotiables. If you want to get somebody to come to work, have to pay them a decent amount, have to keep them safe. If you want them to last, you've got to work on burnout prevention, which is lifestyle and balance. And then, if you want them to engage with you and grow with you and build their capacity, you have to have them express their values, feel like they're making an impact in the world, and feel like they have somewhere to go. And this is where I think we're shifting from purpose of a company was to create value. People were the means by which we created that value. Now I think it's shifting. People become the purpose of a company, developing your people, and then the value they create becomes the byproduct. When we're moving at this kind of speed, that's a better focus. And some research that came out prior to the pandemic on leadership found that leaders who called up their people and said, not where are you on that and blah, 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 blah. That's task-based said, how are you? How can I help you? How can I remove some hurdles? Much more successful leadership, particularly remote work leaders. And this is pre-pandemic study. So to kind of land the plane, let's go back to where we work. I think it's going to be hybrid and virtual going forward. I think that's non-negotiable. We'll have unique augmented experiences. Might be the metaverse. I think that's really good for training. I think it's good for gaming, maybe some meetings, but there'll be some other things like that. I think in real life, IRL becomes much more important. Who works? Diversity means adaptation for all. We've got an older workforce. We've got to deal with issues of men being on the sidelines, women being on the sidelines for different reasons that we need to engage more of our workforce. This diversity is a chemical change. We are going to focus less on leading people based on driving productivity into leading people to inspire human potential, less of a focus on time and productivity, more of a focus on engagement. I have an expression to say, we used to learn once in order to work, now we work in order to learn continuously. Emphasis on collaboration and exploration, and then why we work, especially with these generations, is you're going to attract your people that they can express their full selves with you, their values, and they have a purpose in the world. You're making an impact in the world. And to leave you with 3 things to make it easy to focus on, I think there are 3 fundamental things. If we focus on those, we are better equipped to ride whatever the next disruption may be. So your most precious resource is your time. I just took 40 some odd minutes of it. You can't ever get back. So mindfully manage your time. I hope that that 40 some odd minutes I took was worth it. The most valuable asset you have is your trust. You sell your trust. Products, services, experiences, or souvenirs from that. People join you because they trust you. People follow because you trust you. They vote for you because they trust you. Every interaction you have the opportunity and the decision to make, whether you're building or burning trust. And then your most essential investment is your capacity. And that's not your ability to do everything. It's your ability to meet the moment. That's why my work to learn mantra comes in. So I thank you very much for those 44 minutes you can't get back. You can find me if you have questions, because I don't think we're doing Q&A. Are we doing Q&A? No? If anybody has a question, I'll take it, but you can find me to ask me a question if you want to. Thank you very much.
Maybe that time was worth it. We appreciate it. I want to thank all of you for allowing me the privilege of helping lead the NC Chamber. Your leadership and engagement are crucial to North Carolina's successes, as is our continued collaboration to secure an even more competitive future for our state. I hope today has inspired you to get your company further involved with the NC Chamber. We provide multiple ways for you to take part in shaping our state's business climate. You can participate in our broad-based coalition like Destination 2030, in the NC Manufacturing Council, a quarterly virtual forum for cornerstone members in the industry, and sponsor or attend our annual events and webinars to build your connections and knowledge to help advance your organization. We appreciate you taking a moment now to complete our evaluation. It is really, really important to us if you could give us your perspective so we could enhance on our program. And there's a paper in your packet that you could use. And please be on the lookout for a recap email with event highlights, including today's recordings. The next conference we will be holding it in person and virtually. It is the Transportation and Infrastructure Summit on April 28th. And to learn more about these opportunities, please visit the NC Chamber website. On behalf of all of us at the NC Chamber, we're grateful for your engagement today. I want to extend thanks to you for playing an active role in NC Chamber's 80th annual meeting. We wish you a wonderful spring evening. Be safe and look forward to hosting you again soon. Thank you very much.